In Hawaii, a New Year's Eve celebration turning deadly after illegal fireworks exploded at a home in Honolulu, igniting this massive fiery blast that authorities say killed at least 3 people and critically injured more than 20 others.
As cities lit up and champagne bottles popped, fate had other plans for 7 individuals who never saw the night's end coming. In the middle of cheers, countdowns, and fireworks, their final moments quietly unfolded. These are the chilling stories of New Year's death that turned a night of celebration into tragedy. Rochester vehicular attack. In the early hours of January 1st, 2024, what should have been a calm, close to New Year's celebrations in Rochester, New York, unraveled into a scene of devastation outside the Kodak Theater. The theater had just hosted a New Year's Eve concert that drew about 1,000 people. By 12:50 a.m. Eastern Time, the show had ended and concertgoers began leaving, many using a nearby crosswalk to leave the area. The atmosphere was celebratory, with people talking, checking their phones, and heading home, unaware that events were about to take a sudden and tragic turn. At that moment, a rented 2023 Ford Expedition approached the area. The vehicle was loaded with multiple gasoline canisters. As pedestrians crossed the street, the SUV accelerated, crossed into the oncoming lane, and moved toward the crosswalk. Before reaching the pedestrians, the vehicle collided with a Mitsubishi Outlander that was pulling out of a nearby parking lot. The impact was violent. Almost immediately, the Ford Expedition caught fire and exploded, sending shockwaves through the area and plunging the street into chaos. Emergency calls poured in as witnesses ran for safety and tried to make sense of what had just happened outside a venue filled with music and celebration moments earlier. Inside the Mitsubishi were Justina Hughes and Joshua Orr, both seated in the back. They were killed in the collision along with the driver, who also died at the scene. 9 others were injured, some seriously, and were rushed to nearby hospitals. Weeks later, a 3rd victim succumbed to her injuries, raising the death toll further and deepening the tragedy. As investigators began piecing together the events, the Federal Bureau of Investigation announced it was examining the incident as a possible act of terrorism and a hate crime, citing the presence of gasoline canisters and the deliberate nature of the crash. However, the Rochester Police Department later stated that their investigation found no evidence of a bias-related motive, leaving the precise intent behind the attack a matter of continued scrutiny. Authorities identified the driver as Michael Avery, who lived in North Syracuse, roughly 87 miles east of Rochester. Surveillance footage revealed that in the days leading up to the attack, Avery had purchased gasoline and gas canisters at multiple locations across Monroe and Ontario counties. Investigators also discovered that Avery had left his personal vehicle at Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport, rented a hotel room at a Woodspring Suites in Greece, and obtained the SUV used in the attack shortly before New Year's Eve. Public records showed that Avery had a long history of minor law enforcement interactions between 2003 and 2016 across several communities in Onondaga County, including Syracuse and surrounding towns. However, fully explained what led to that night's events. For Rochester, the attack permanently altered the memory of New Year's Eve 2024. What was meant to be a night of music, countdowns, and fresh starts instead became a moment of mourning. 10-year-old girl killed by celebratory gunfire. Just after midnight on January 1st, as fireworks echoed across Miami-Dade County, Florida, a family's New Year's Eve gathering turned into a scene of heartbreak that would linger long after the celebrations ended. Inside a home where relatives had come together to welcome the new year, 10-year-old Yanaliz Munguia was surrounded by family. The night had been filled with laughter, food, and the familiar sounds of celebration drifting in from outside. Fireworks, cheers, and tragically, gunshots fired into the air. A practice often referred to as celebratory gunfire. Moments after the clock struck midnight, a single stray bullet fired somewhere outside the home fell back to the ground at high speed. It penetrated the house and struck Yanaliz. who had not been anywhere near the celebration taking place outdoors. Family members immediately called emergency services. First responders rushed to the scene and transported Yanalise to a nearby hospital, where doctors fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead. Yanalise became an innocent victim of a reckless act carried out blocks away from where she stood. Law enforcement launched an investigation, confirming that the fatal shot was from celebratory gunfire bullets fired into the air during New Year's celebrations that inevitably returned to the ground. The community was left shaken. What should have been remembered as the start of a new year instead became a reminder of how quickly joy can turn into tragedy. Vigils were held in Yanalise Munguia's memory, with neighbors, friends, and strangers gathering to mourn a life lost far too soon. Massive fireworks explosion. As New Year's Eve celebrations unfolded in Honolulu, Hawaii, a private gathering meant to welcome a new beginning instead ended in one of the most devastating fireworks-related tragedies the city had ever seen.
In Hawaii, a New Year's Eve celebration turning deadly after illegal fireworks exploded at a home in Honolulu, igniting this massive fiery blast that authorities say killed at least 3 people and critically injured more than 20 others.
The celebration was taking place at a residential location where family members, friends, and children had gathered as midnight approached. Fireworks, many of them illegal and unregulated, had been brought to the party, a common but dangerous practice in parts of Hawaii, where powerful aerial fireworks are often used outside of permitted displays. As the countdown to the new year passed, several fireworks were ignited in quick succession. Moments later, something went catastrophically wrong. A massive explosion erupted when multiple fireworks detonated at once, triggering a chain reaction. The blast tore through the immediate area, sending flames and debris outward and instantly overwhelming everyone nearby. What had been a celebration seconds earlier collapsed into panic as people ran, screamed, and desperately tried to escape the fire. Emergency calls flooded in almost immediately. First responders arrived at a chaotic and harrowing scene, where victims were suffering from severe burns and other critical injuries. Firefighters worked to control the blaze, while paramedics triaged the injured, transporting the most serious cases to hospitals across the island. At least 6 people were killed in the explosion. Among them was a 3-year-old boy. Several adults also lost their lives, while many others were left with life-changing injuries, including extensive burns that required long-term medical treatment. Authorities quickly confirmed that the fireworks involved were illegal, far more powerful than consumer fireworks permitted under local law. Investigators began piecing together how such a large quantity of explosive material had been stored and ignited in a residential setting, emphasizing that the explosion was not a freak accident, but the result of extremely dangerous and unlawful handling of fireworks. In the days that followed, the tragedy sent shockwaves through Honolulu. Hospitals continued treating victims, families mourned loved ones, and the community struggled to process how a night of celebration had turned so violently destructive. Worker killed by exploding fireworks materials. On December 31, 2023, at a seaside hotel in Port Dickson, Malaysia, they were prepared to usher in the new year with fireworks and celebrations, a routine setup they perform every New Year's Eve. On the roof of a car park building at the hotel, 2 workers from a fireworks installation company were carrying out the fireworks setup for the hotel's New Year Eve display. The work was still in its final stages, hours before the scheduled celebration was to begin. At approximately 11:50 a.m., the calm of the setup was shattered. Without warning, fireworks materials exploded while the men were on the rooftop. The explosion was sudden and violent, giving them no time to react. One of the workers, a 40-year-old man, suffered catastrophic injuries and died instantly at the scene. His colleague was injured in the blast, but survived. Emergency services were called immediately. The injured worker was rushed to Port Dickson Hospital for urgent medical care, while authorities secured the area to prevent further danger. Police opened an investigation to determine exactly what caused the fireworks materials to explode during installation. The case was officially classified as a sudden death, and investigators began examining handling procedures, safety measures, and the condition of the fireworks materials. Superintendent I.D. Sham also urged the public not to speculate or spread unverified information, stressing that doing so could interfere with the ongoing investigation. As the news of the incident spread, the tragedy cast a shadow over New Year's Eve preparations in the area, which was meant to be a celebration. Welcoming a new year instead became a moment of mourning for the victim's family, co-workers, and the community. Germany fireworks, chaos, and deaths. As Germany welcomed the transition from 2024 into 2025, the country's long-standing New Year's Eve tradition of fireworks once again filled city streets with noise, light, and celebration. But beneath the bursts of color, the night spiraled into widespread chaos, leaving 5 people dead and hundreds injured in a series of incidents linked to illegal and homemade fireworks, often referred to as firework bombs. Across major cities and smaller towns alike, emergency services braced for a busy night, as they do every year. Fireworks are deeply ingrained in German New Year's culture, with private citizens legally allowed to set off consumer-grade fireworks during a short window around midnight. However, during this New Year's Eve period, authorities reported a sharp rise in the use of banned, modified, and improvised explosive fireworks, far exceeding legal limits. As midnight approached, the streets became crowded with people. In many areas, powerful homemade fireworks were ignited in residential neighborhoods, courtyards, and public squares. These devices are often constructed from illegally obtained pyrotechnics and explosives, far more dangerous than standard fireworks. In several separate incidents across the country, the consequences turned fatal. 5 people lost their lives, some killed instantly by explosive blasts, others succumbing to their injuries shortly afterward. Victims included individuals handling the fireworks themselves, as well as bystanders caught nearby. Hospitals across Germany reported an overwhelming influx of patients. Hundreds of people were injured, many suffering from serious burns, blast-related injuries, and damage to hands, eyes, and faces. Emergency rooms worked through the night as paramedics transported the injured from streets filled with smoke, debris, and shattered glass. In some cities, medical staff described conditions similar to mass casualty events. Officers were deployed nationwide, responding to fires sparked by fireworks, explosions in densely populated areas, and clashes with individuals setting off illegal devices. Firefighters battled blazes in apartment buildings, cars, and balconies, ignited by stray or misfired fireworks. Authorities later confirmed that many of the most serious injuries and deaths were linked specifically to illegal or homemade fireworks, which are prohibited under German law due to their instability and destructive power. In the days that followed, the scale of the tragedy prompted national reflection. Politicians, medical professionals, and law enforcement officials renewed calls for stricter enforcement, tighter regulations, or even broader bans on private fireworks, arguing that the risks had once again proven too great. Others pointed to the repeated pattern seen each year: crowded cities, alcohol consumption, and powerful explosives combining into a dangerous mix. For many Germans, the 2024 to 2025 New Year's Eve will not be remembered for celebration or renewal, but for sirens, hospital corridors, and lives cut short. New Orleans truck attack, 2025. In the early hours of New Year's Day, January 1st, 2025, the celebrations filling Bourbon Street in New Orleans' historic French Quarter were shattered by a coordinated act of violence that would become one of the deadliest attacks in the city's modern history. At around 3:15 a.m., as thousands of people celebrated the arrival of the new year, and the city prepared to host the 2025 Sugar Bowl later that day, a white Ford F-150 Lightning pickup truck suddenly entered the heart of the French Quarter. The driver, Shamsuddin Bahar Jabbar, a 42-year-old Houston resident, steered the vehicle onto the sidewalk to bypass police vehicles and barricades positioned to protect the area. Jabbar drove along a 3-block stretch of Bourbon Street between Canal and Conti Streets, deliberately striking people in his path. He was attempting to hit as many people as possible because the steel bollards designed to prevent vehicle access had been removed and were being replaced ahead of the Sugar Bowl, while temporary Archer vehicle barriers purchased years earlier for this exact threat had not yet been deployed. The truck eventually crashed into an aerial work platform, bringing it to a stop. Jabbar then exited the vehicle wearing body armor and opened fire. Police officers who were already nearby due to heightened holiday security immediately engaged him. A shootout followed, during which 2 officers were shot and wounded. Officers returned fire, striking Jabbar multiple times and killing him at the scene. By the time the violence ended, 14 people had been killed, excluding the attacker, and at least 57 others were injured. All of the victims who died succumbed to blunt force injuries caused by the vehicle. Emergency responders transported 30 victims to 5 area hospitals, while others sought treatment on their own. A reunification center was set up at University Medical Center, New Orleans, to help families locate loved ones. Investigators quickly uncovered evidence pointing to terrorist motivation. An ISIS flag was found inside the truck, and Jabbar had posted videos in the hours before the attack declaring allegiance to ISIS. The FBI determined that he had been inspired by ISIS propaganda, though the case was classified as domestic terrorism due to the absence of direct foreign coordination. On January 9, 2025, the ISIS-linked publication Al-Naba claimed responsibility for the attack. The identities of all 14 victims were released in the days that followed. They ranged in age from 18 to 63. Among them was Edward Pettifer, a 31-year-old British citizen from London, as well as 2 residents of New Orleans. Mexico and Israel both confirmed that their nationals were among the injured. In the immediate aftermath, hotels in the French Quarter were evacuated, streets were locked down, and service workers were turned away from the area. The Sugar Bowl, scheduled for the evening of January 1st at Caesars Superdome, was postponed to the following day, as authorities conducted extensive security sweeps. The game ultimately went ahead without incident under tightened security. City leaders openly described the attack as terrorism. Officials also acknowledged long-standing concerns about vehicle ramming threats in the French Quarter, concerns documented as far back as 2017, when the city first purchased temporary vehicle barriers for large events. In the days that followed, New Orleans began reassessing security measures ahead of future major gatherings, including Super Bowl 59, scheduled for the city later in February. Moments of silence were held before the rescheduled Sugar Bowl and later during Super Bowl events, honoring both the victims and the first responders. For New Orleans, the first morning of 2025 became a moment of collective grief, a reminder that even in a city defined by celebration and resilience, a single act of violence can forever change the meaning of a new beginning. Tribistovo carbon monoxide poisoning. In the quiet village of Tribistovo in western Bosnia and Herzegovina, New Year's Eve 2020 into 2021 began as a night of excitement and freedom for a group of teenagers. The group of 8 teenagers in their late teens and early 20s had gathered at a remote holiday cottage to celebrate the arrival of the new year. Isolated from the city and surrounded by winter cold, the cottage offered privacy and warmth for the night. Music played, food and drinks were shared, and the group settled in, expecting to wake up together to a fresh start. The cottage, however, lacked proper heating and a stable electricity supply. To keep warm, a portable generator was brought in and used to power heating equipment overnight. What no one inside realized was that the generator was emitting carbon monoxide, a colorless gas that can overwhelm the body without warning. As the night progressed, carbon monoxide slowly filled the cottage. The teenagers, unaware of the danger, fell asleep. There were no alarms, no visible smoke, and no sign of distress, only a silent buildup of toxic gas. By the morning of January 1st, 2021, something felt wrong. Around 10 a.m., occupants and residents of nearby homes noticed that no one had left the cottage yet. Repeated knocks on the door went unanswered. What alarmed them most was the realization that the generator was still running inside. Fearing the worst, the residents forced entry by breaking the window. Inside, they found the teenagers unconscious on the floor, some sitting upright where they had last been moments before losing consciousness. Paramedics arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do except declare all 8 dead at the scene. Authorities found no signs of violence. Investigators determined that the cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, caused by generator emissions used for heating inside the sealed cottage. The gas had accumulated overnight, depriving the victims of oxygen while they slept. News of the tragedy sent shockwaves across Bosnia and Herzegovina. A night meant to symbolize youth, joy, and a new beginning had instead claimed 8 young lives at once, devastating families and leaving the small community of Tribistovo in mourning. Vigils were held, and tributes poured in as the country grappled with the scale of the loss. For Tribistovo and the victim's family, New Year's Day 2021 did not represent a beginning, but an ending. For many, New Year's Eve marks a fresh start. For others, it became the end. Every story you've heard tonight began as a celebration. So let me ask you, which was the most tragic for you? And if you want more content like this, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. See you in the next video above.